pleasure and a privilege to be here today. Thank you for coming out. When I launched my campaign for Congress last month, I said I was running in order to fight for hardworking Arkansas taxpayers against the unfair top-down government in Washington. The government that unfairly picks winners and losers, that has an IRS running rampant by looking into our lives, that has overly burdensome regulations that stifle our ability to grow good-paying jobs for our workers, and that refuses to live within its means. That threatens the futures of my children and yours and your grandchildren. There is no example of a government program that does all these things I've described better than Obamacare. That is why it must be repealed and replaced with a new law that ensures Americans have access to health care, that we have the power to choose, and there's nothing standing in the way of us and our doctors. Today, we're in the midst of year 5 of the Obama presidency, and here's what we've seen of the signature eponymous law of his administration. Number 1, it's driving up premiums. Alice mentioned this. In 2008, when he was first running for president, then Senator Obama said, when I'm president, we'll bring down health care costs by $2,500 for the typical family. And now there isn't a day that goes by where we do not read a news story about states where insurance premiums for young people do not shoot through the roof. The most notorious example of this is Colorado, where rates are going to increase nearly 140%. As I've visited with employers in Arkansas, I'm hearing real Arkansas job providers describe insurance rate increases in the 25 to 50% range. I'm also hearing them talk about the reluctance to reinvest in the businesses because of the uncertainties this law has created. The second thing is that it's forcing workers and their families out of the plans they like. We've all heard how UPS will stop offering health coverage to the spouses of 15,000 workers. The University of Virginia is cutting benefits for spouses, and in a Forbes article from Monday, large employers that aren't dropping spouses are now charging $100 monthly surcharges for health benefits. The third thing is that it makes it harder for small businesses to create good-paying jobs through higher taxes and overly burdensome government mandates. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, less than a third of small businesses say they are prepared to deal with Obamacare's regulatory mandates. When it comes to hiring, the stakes are worse. 71% say they would be less likely to hire someone because of Obamacare. The solution to this would be very simple. Repeal it and replace it with a plan that first off is fair to Americans, that doesn't pick winners and losers, allows small businesses to grow good-paying jobs, doesn't add to the national debt, and most importantly, lets Americans be in control of their health care decisions. Until we can successfully repeal and replace President Obama's health care law, he should be granting us as hardworking Americans the same sort of delays and waivers as he is unfairly giving his hand-picked businesses, labor unions, and political allies. This very day, we have a government that gives their labor union allies and other friends thousands of waivers and delays of Obamacare, but doesn't even think of helping hardworking individual taxpayers. Talk about incongruity. That's a flaming example of it. It's a government led by a president who just chose to ignore a part of his own law. And when Arkansas's own Congressman Tim Griffin put forward a bill to make the delay of the employer mandate legal, President Obama issued a veto threat. And when it came time for President Obama to treat us fairly with a delay of the individual mandate, he threatened to veto that too. Delaying the employer mandate for a year must have been one of those unintended consequences or unanticipated issues President Clinton discussed in his defense of Obamacare yesterday. He also discussed the need to do better working together. Representative Griffin's bill passed the House with bipartisan support, yet President Obama said he'd veto the bill. I would like to listen to President Clinton's explanation of why President Obama refused to work together. And speaking of President Clinton's Obamacare defense, I'd like to say that I agree with him that there are issues with the law. I like to fish, and growing up and living in Garland County, where President Clinton grew up, gave me lots of chances to cast a line into the water. One thing I learned is that if you aren't catching fish, you might want to consider cutting bait and trying something new, instead of continually casting something that is not working. President Clinton, like many of President Obama's political friends, likes to focus on the amount of repeal votes Republicans in Congress have passed. fact is that in the last Congress, President Obama signed 7 bills into law that repeal or defund parts of Obamacare. I say we can clean the slate and work together in a bipartisan fashion to create a law that makes economic sense, treats hardworking Americans fairly, stops picking winners and losers, and ends the top-down style of